Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was like wyldstyle from the Lego movie and was a master builder using stuff in the environment around him to build stuff like weapons vehicles in 10 seconds, and he has die-style type of attitude and fighting skills. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The Symphony of the City was a familiar, grating tune. Car horns blared in a staccato rhythm, the distant wail of a siren provided a mournful melody, and the low, constant rumble of a million lives moving in concert was the bass line. For most, it was background noise. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a resource library. Today, the symphony was horribly out of tune. The discordance came from Mizudafu's central shopping district, a place usually defined by the cheerful cacophony of commerce. Now, it was a place of screams. A C-list villain, a man whose quirk and ambition were equally underwhelming, was having a very public tantrum. His name, according to the frantic news helicopters already circling overhead, was Girthquake. His quirk was minor gigantification, allowing him to swell to about 15 feet tall, with a corresponding, though not proportional, increase in strength. He was currently using that strength to peel the side off an armored cash transport like it was a stubborn sardine can. Stay back! I just want the new limited edition Crimson Riot All-Star figure! Girthquake roared, his voice more petulant than menacing. And the cash to buy it! And maybe a new sound system! The police had formed a perimeter, their expressions a mixture of weary professionalism and raw frustration. They were holding, but just barely. Their standard-issue equipment was about as effective as throwing pebbles at a dump truck. Where's a hero with a strength quirk when you need one? One officer grumbled into his radio, ducking as Girthquake swatted a lamppost aside. Slugger is on the other side of town, and Mount Lady is dealing with that thing by the bay. From the rooftop of a 5-story office building across the street, a figure watched, cloaked in the anonymity of a dark green hoodie. Izuku Midoriya's gaze was sharp, analytical, and utterly unimpressed. His freckled face, usually soft and open, was set in a mask of cool, critical assessment. Amateur, he thought, his lips barely moving. No plan, no exit strategy. Grandstanding for a D-tier motivation. Threat level, inconvenience. Collateral damage potential, moderate to annoying. His eyes, a vibrant emerald green, seemed to glow with a faint internal light as his quirk activated. The world dissolved. The solid, defined reality seen by others fractured into a billion shimmering components. The lamppost Girthquake had just swatted away wasn't a broken piece of city infrastructure. It was a 14-foot hollow aluminum pole, a high-intensity discharge bulb, a polycarbonate lens, and 20 meters of high-grade copper wiring. The police cars weren't just vehicles. They were steel chassis, reinforced glass, rubber tires, and complex engine blocks filled with pistons, belts, and gears. The entire street was a smorgasbord of raw potential. With a silent, fluid grace that spoke of years of practice, Izuku pushed off the roof's ledge. He didn't fall, he flowed. He executed a perfect parkour roll onto the top of a lower air conditioning unit, his worn-out red sneakers barely making a sound. From there, he vaulted to a fire escape, his movements economical and precise, a stark contrast to the villain's clumsy rampage. He descended into the alleyway behind a row of shops, a place most people would avoid. For Izuku, it was a treasure trove. The alley smelled of damp concrete, rotting vegetables, and rust. It was perfect. His target, a scrapyard overflowing behind an auto body shop. It was a metal graveyard, a chaotic monument to obsolescence. To Izuku, it was a symphony of potential. He landed in the center of the yard, the crunch of gravel and broken glass under his feet. His eyes scanned the heaps of detritus. There. A hydraulic pump from a crushed sedan's brake system. And there, a spool of industrial steel cabling, thick as his thumb, left over from a construction project. Perfect. He spotted a mangled engine block from a delivery truck and several lengths of rebar sticking out of a pile of concrete rubble. Okay. Let's dance, he muttered, the words a low, rapid-fire hum. The next 10 seconds were a blur of impossible creation. Second 1 to 2. He moved with a speed that was not quite human. He ripped the hydraulic pump from the car wreckage with a single, sharp tug. His fingers found the pressure release valve instinctively, his brain already calculating the force it could generate. Second 3 to 4, he grabbed 3 lengths of rebar. With his bare hands he bent the solid steel into a triangular frame, the metal groaning in protest. He didn't need a welder. His quirk allowed him to see and manipulate the micro-fissures in materials, locking them together with pinpoint force, creating bonds stronger than any solder. Second 5 to 7, he mounted the hydraulic pump to the rebar frame. His hands were a whirlwind, snatching bolts from a scattered toolbox and snapping them into place. He unspooled the steel cable, weaving it into a wide, heavy net with a speed that would have made a master weaver weep. The clanging and screeching of metal wasn't noise, it was the sound of assembly. Second 8 to 9, he attached the net to a projectile system he'd fashioned from the engine block's largest piston and a reinforced metal pipe. He connected the pump to the piston, creating a single-shot, high-pressure launcher. It was ugly, a brutalist monstrosity of mismatched parts and raw function. It was beautiful. Second 10, he hefted the device onto his shoulder. It weighed at least 60 kilograms, but adrenaline and a deep familiarity with leverage made it manageable. The finished weapon, a hydraulic-powered net cannon he mentally dubbed the Constrictor, hummed with contained power. He stepped out of the alley, aiming over the hood of a police cruiser. The officer behind it yelped in surprise, staring at the hooded kid who had just appeared with a weapon that looked like it belonged in a post-apocalyptic war zone. "Hey, big guy!" Izuku shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. Girthquake turned, his face a mask of confusion. "Who the hell are you?" "Just the cleanup crew," Izuku said, a smirk touching his lips. He squeezed the trigger mechanism, a modified handbrake lever. With a deafening hiss thump, the hydraulic pump discharged its full power. The piston fired, launching the steel cable net at incredible speed. It unfurled in midair, a flying metal spiderweb. Girthquake had no time to react. The net slammed into him, the sheer kinetic force staggering him. The heavy cables wrapped around his oversized limbs, and as he stumbled backward, he tripped over a fire hydrant. He crashed to the ground with a monumental thud that shook the pavement. The more he struggled, the tighter the cables cinched. Silence. The police stared, dumbfounded. The news helicopters zoomed in. Izuku didn't wait for a thank you. He dropped the now useless launcher, its purpose served. It clattered to the ground, already looking like a pile of junk again. Before anyone could process what had just happened, he ducked back into the alley, scaled a wall with the ease of a squirrel, and disappeared over the rooftops. The green of his hoodie the last thing anyone saw. His work was done. Efficient. Clean. No fuss. Now, he had to get home before his mom started to worry. The Midoriya apartment was a haven of quiet domesticity, a stark contrast to the chaotic world Izuku so often engaged with. It smelled of green tea and floor polish, a comforting scent that always made the tension in his shoulders ease, if only for a moment. "I'm home," he called out, toying off his battered red sneakers at the Janken. "Izuku! Welcome home, sweetie!" Inko Midoriya bustled out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her smile was as warm and bright as ever, but her eyes held a familiar, persistent worry. She scanned him from head to toe, a practiced maternal inspection. "Oh, you have grease on your cheek again. And is that a tear in your sleeve? Were you tinkering?" "Just a hobby, Mom," Izuku replied, his tone deliberately casual as he wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, smearing the grease slightly. "Found some interesting parts by the community center." It was their routine, their dance of polite fiction. Inko knew his tinkering often involved situations that ended up on the evening news under headlines like "Mysterious scrap metal vigilante thwarts robbery." Izuku knew she knew. But admitting it would open a door to a conversation neither of them was ready to have. Admitting it would mean acknowledging the danger, and Inko's heart couldn't take that. He walked past her toward his room. "Smells good. Is it Katsudon?" "Of course. A reward for your hard work at school," she said, her voice bright but fragile. She followed him, her gaze lingering on the worn-out state of his hoodie. "Izuku, the police called the school again. About your quirk registration. They said your quirk's official classification, high-speed deconstruction/reconstruction. Might need a psychological addendum if you keep getting into trouble for taking things apart. Izuku froze at his bedroom door, his back to her. I'm not getting into trouble. I'm just exploring the limits of my quirk by taking apart the school's broken gym equipment to build a self-propelling floor buffer? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Principal Tanaka said it was an act of vandalism, even if the floors have never been shinier. Izuku sighed, the cool facade cracking for just a second. He turned, his expression softening. It was broken, Mom. It was just going to be thrown out. I made it useful again. That's all I do. I see things that are broken, and I fix them. Or I make them into something better. Inko wrung her hands. I know, sweetie. I worry. This power of yours, it's not flashy like Endeavor's or strong like All Might's. It gets you dirty. It puts you in dangerous places. People don't understand it. They see you with a pile of junk, and they get scared. Her words hit a little too close to home. He gave her a small, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm careful. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some schematics to review before dinner. He slipped into his room, closing the door gently behind him, leaving his worried mother in the hallway. His room was an explosion of organized chaos. The walls were a testament to his fractured psyche, faded, well-loved All Might posters from his childhood, the symbol of peace in his prime, smiling that indomitable smile, were still there, but they were partially obscured. Taped over them were complex blueprints and hand-drawn schematics, scribbled on notebook paper, napkins, and the backs of old homework assignments. A design for a compressed-air grappling hook fought for space with All Might's Golden Age costume. A detailed breakdown of a magnetic accelerator cannon overlapped his signature, Texas Smash, pose. His desk was a mad scientist's dream. Soldering irons lay next to half-disassembled toasters. Wires of every color spilled from drawers. Under his bed, instead of monsters, were neatly categorized bins, ferrous metals, copper wiring, assorted gauges, plastics high tensile, salvage servos. His entire life was a process of collection and creation. He was a dragon hoarding not gold, but potential. He sat on his chair, which he had modified with shock absorbers from a mountain bike and a lumbar support system made from a car seat, and spun to face his computer. But his gaze drifted to a small object on his shelf, a miniature, perfectly balanced carousel, crafted from old tin cans, bicycle spokes, and the motor from a broken electric fan. He picked it up, the cool metal familiar in his palm. His mind drifted back to the day the world first fractured for him. Flashback. The sun was bright, the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, and the Aldera Elementary School playground was a riot of childish laughter. A 5-year-old Izuku Midoriya sat in the sandbox, meticulously building a castle. He was a quiet, observant child, more interested in watching how things worked than in the loud, boisterous games the other children played, especially the one led by Katsuki Bakugo. "Faster, you extras!" Bakugo yelled, a king on his jungle gym throne. His quirk had already manifested, tiny, harmless pops and crackles sparking in his palms. It was flashy, powerful, and undeniably heroic. He was the center of their small universe. Izuku watched, but his attention was caught by something else. The swing set. One of the swings was broken. A thick bolt had rusted through, and the seat dangled uselessly from a single chain. A little girl was crying nearby, disappointed. The teacher on duty, Ms. Tsubasa, sighed. "Don't worry, kids. We'll call maintenance. It'll be fixed, eventually." Izuku walked over to the broken swing, his brow furrowed. It was a problem. A simple, mechanical problem. He stared at it, his small mind trying to figure out how it was supposed to connect. And then it happened. For a dizzying, terrifying second, the world dissolved. The solid, comforting reality he knew warped and shimmered. The broken swing was no longer a broken swing. It was a collection of distinct parts, each glowing with a faint internal light. Steel A-frame, rusted iron bolt compromised. 2 lengths of steel chain. Polymer seat. 4 anchor bolts secure. His vision expanded. The broken tricycle by the fence wasn't a sad, forgotten toy. It was 3 rubber wheels, a tubular steel frame, plastic pedals, a chain drive, ball bearings. The jungle gym was a lattice of pipes. The slide was a single, large piece of molded plastic. The world had become a blueprint. An instruction manual. A toy box. Without conscious thought, his body moved. He was in a trance, his quirk, his brand new, terrifying, wonderful quirk, guiding his hands. He touched the broken swing, and with a gentle twist, the rusted bolt crumbled to dust in his fingers. The seat and chains fell to the ground. The other kids stopped and stared. "Deku? What are you doing?" Bakugo called, annoyed that the attention had shifted from him. Izuku didn't answer. He was listening to the symphony of components in his head. He needed a central pivot. The front wheel assembly of the tricycle would work. He scurried over, and his small hands disassembled it with impossible speed and precision. He took the chains from the broken swing and the one next to it. He needed more seats. He saw the discarded lids of 2 large plastic bins by the school wall. Perfect. In less than a minute, the playground fell silent. The children and even Ms. Tsubasa watched, mouths agape, as the small, green-haired boy worked with a frantic, focused energy. Metal screeched as he bent the tricycle's frame into a new shape. Pieces snapped together with audible clicks. He used the slide's smooth surface as a base, anchoring his new creation with surprising stability. When he stepped back, panting slightly, the trance-like state receded. Where 2 swings had been, one broken, now stood something new. A miniature, working carousel. The tricycle's wheel assembly acted as a central spinning hub. The chains, now shortened, held the 2 plastic bin lids as seats. It was crude, unbalanced, and made of garbage, but when he gave it a push, it spun. It actually, truly spun. The little girl who had been crying gasped in delight. Another boy cautiously poked it. It was real. Izuku beamed, a proud, toothy grin splitting his face. He had done it. He had a quirk. He wasn't just a useless Deku. He could make things. He looked at his best friend, his idol. "Kaken! Look! I fixed it. I made it better." Bakugo hopped down from the jungle gym, his expression not one of awe, but of deep, profound disgust. He walked over and kicked the base of the carousel, hard. "You didn't fix anything." Bakugo sneered, the crackles in his palms growing a little louder, a little angrier. "You broke it more! You broke the swing, and you broke the tricycle. All you did was play with garbage." Izuku's smile faltered. "No, Look at him!" Bakugo announced to the other kids, pointing a damning finger. "He's digging through trash like a beggar. His quirk is a garbage quirk." He shoved Izuku, who stumbled back into the sand. "You're not quirkless, you're just a junker. That's your new name. Junker Deku." The other kids, always quick to follow Bakugo's lead, started laughing. "Junker! Junker Deku!" Tears welled in Izuku's eyes. The pride and wonder he had felt curdled into shame. He had performed a miracle, a feat of intuitive engineering that should have been impossible, and his reward was a new, crueler nickname. Ms. Tsubasa finally snapped out of her shock, her face pale. "Izuku Midoriya! What have you done? That is school property. You can't just go around destroying things." "But I may," he whimpered, but his voice was lost in the teacher's scolding and the children's laughter. That was the day Izuku learned 3 critical lessons. 1. His quirk was amazing. 2. Nobody else would ever see it that way. And 3. Junker hurt far, far worse than quirkless ever could have. The first was an absence of power. The second was an accusation that the power he did have was dirty, shameful, and wrong. From that day on, his relationship with Bakugo changed. It wasn't about the strong bullying the weak anymore. It was a fundamental clash of ideologies. Bakugo was clean, explosive, glorious destruction. His power was an exclamation point. Izuku was messy, complex, chaotic creation. His power was a convoluted diagram. In a world that valued simple, direct applications of power, Izuku's genius was seen as a character flaw. So he built a wall. Not of scrap metal and wires, but of sarcasm, aloofness, and an attitude that said, "I'm too cool to care what you think." It was the only way to protect the soft, heroic core that still beat underneath, the part of him that still looked at All Might posters and dreamed of saving people with a smile. And flashback. A sharp rap on his door pulled Izuku back to the present. The tiny metal carousel felt cold in his hand. "Izuku? Dinner's ready," Inko's voice called softly. He placed the carousel back on the shelf, a monument to his first and most bitter lesson. Coming, he joined his mother at their small dining table. The TV was on, murmuring the evening news in the background. The glorious, steaming bowl of katsudon sat before him, a peace offering and a silent apology all in one. He ate, the familiar comfort of the food warring with the lingering unease of his memories and the fresh grime of his vigilante excursion. And in other news, the downtown sludge villain incident from earlier today continues to cause major traffic delays. The news anchor said, her voice crisp and professional. Pro-heroes are on the scene, but are struggling to find a way to combat the villain's fluid body without harming the hostage, a local middle school student. Izuku's head snapped up. On the screen was horrifyingly familiar footage. A writhing, monstrous being made of green, viscous sludge was rampaging in an underpass. Pro-heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Backdraft, were all there, but they were helpless. Kamui was useless against a liquid enemy, and Death Arms couldn't get a grip. Then the camera zoomed in. Trapped within the suffocating mass of sludge, struggling and thrashing, was a boy with spiky, ash-blonde hair. Explosions, muffled and weak, burst futilely from his hands. It was Bakugo. The spoon fell from Izuku's hand, clattering onto the floor. Kaken. The air left his lungs. A cold dread, colder than any he'd felt on a rooftop, washed over him. This wasn't a C-list villain stealing a toy. This wasn't a problem he could solve from a distance with a cleverly built gadget. This was a monster. And it was killing the boy who had defined so much of his life, for better and for worse. He saw the look in Bakugo's eyes on the screen. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't anger. It was terror. Pure, undiluted terror. The same terror Izuku had felt a decade ago in a sandbox, but a million times worse. In that instant, the walls he'd so carefully constructed around his heart didn't just crack, they vaporized. The cynical, aloof persona, the wyldstyle-esque coolness, all of it vanished, burned away by a sudden, overwhelming, and terrifyingly familiar surge of heroic instinct. He was on his feet before he even realized it, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Izuku?" Inko asked, her voice filled with alarm as she saw the look on his face. A look she hadn't seen since he was a little boy, watching All Might videos with wide, starstruck eyes. He didn't answer. His mind was already racing, the analytical hum kicking into overdrive, but this time it wasn't detached. It was desperate. Sludge composition appears non-Newtonian but highly flammable gases present. Sparks from Kaken's quirk are a risk. Structural integrity of the overpass. Potential for a backdraft. Wind speed and direction. Need a way to separate, not scatter. A vortex? A high-pressure system? What materials are there? He turned and strode toward the door, his movements sharp with purpose. He grabbed his green hoodie, the symbol of his vigilante persona, but it felt different now. It wasn't a costume for a hobbyist, it was a uniform. Inko stood up, her face a mask of fear. "Izuku, no! You can't! The heroes are there! It's too dangerous!" He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. He looked back at his mother, and for the first time, she saw the full, unfiltered force of his will in his eyes. It was the unwavering certainty of a hero, a look she recognized from the very symbol of peace whose image was plastered all over his walls. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring all at once. "The heroes are there," Izuku said, his voice low and steady, all traces of sarcasm gone, replaced by a grim resolve. "And they're not doing enough." He pulled the hood over his head, casting his face in shadow. "Someone's gotta clean up the mess. Might as well use the mess to do it." And with that, he was out the door, a phantom of green disappearing into the evening, running not towards a problem to be solved, but towards a life that had to be saved. The symphony of the city was calling, and for the first time, Izuku Midoriya was about to conduct. The world was a blur of concrete and motion. Izuku's lungs burned, a fire stoked by adrenaline and desperation. Each ragged breath was a testament to the fact that this was different. This wasn't a calculated intervention, a coolly executed display of superior tactics against a third-rate moron. This was a panicked, heart-hammering sprint towards a nightmare made real. His carefully constructed walls of detachment, built brick by sarcastic brick over a decade of ridicule, had been reduced to rubble by a single, terrifying news report. Kakin. The name echoed in his mind, a frantic drumbeat against his skull. He vaulted a railing, his sneakers slapping against the pavement, the sound swallowed by the growing pandemonium ahead. The acrid smell of burned sugar and something chemical, the unique scent of Bakugo's nitroglycerin sweat, hit him first, carried on the panicked city breeze. It was a smell tied to 1,000 childhood memories of explosive anger and grudging respect, but now it was tainted with the foul, sewer gas stench of the villain. He rounded the final corner and skidded to a halt, the scene unfolding before him even worse than the helicopter footage had shown. The underpass was a war zone of futility. Flames licked at the storefronts, courtesy of Bakugo's struggling, misdirected explosions. Backdraft, the hero with water hoses for hands, was desperately trying to contain the fires, his attention split between the collateral damage and the main threat. Death Arms was posturing, punching the air and shouting threats, but he couldn't get a solid grip on the liquid mass of the villain. Kamui Woods was a statue of impotent potential, his wooden limbs useless against an enemy with no solid form to bind. They were heroes, powerful and respected, and they were utterly, completely, failing. And in the center of it all was the sludge villain, a writhing, sentient oil slick with maniacal yellow eyes. It was a grotesque parody of life, a fluid prison. And its prisoner was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku's eyes locked onto him. Bakugo, the boy who radiated arrogant confidence like a human furnace, was drowning on dry land. His face, visible for brief, horrifying moments, was a mask of sheer terror and suffocation. His signature explosions were weak, pathetic pops, muffled by the sludge that was forcing its way down his throat, trying to hijack his powerful quirk. He was fighting, of course he was fighting. Bakugo would fight the tide if it tried to pull him under. But he was losing. Each frantic burst of his quirk only served to ignite the fumes around him, making the situation more volatile. For a moment, pure, unthinking panic seized Izuku. The instinct to just run, to throw himself forward with no plan, screamed through him. It was the same instinct he'd suppressed 100 times, the same instinct the heroes on the scene were uselessly indulging. Then, his quirk asserted itself. It wasn't a choice. It was a reflex, a survival mechanism of the mind. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. The world fractured. The screaming chaos resolved into a silent, shimmering database of components. Item: fire hydrant. Material: cast iron body, brass internal fittings. Potential: water pressure approximately 5.2 bar, or 75 psi. A powerful kinetic source if properly channeled. Item: crushed bicycle, abandoned. Material: T6061 aluminum frame, lightweight, high tensile strength, steel chain, sprockets, rubber tubing. Potential: structural frame, conduit, transmission components. Item: street sign, no parking. Material: sheet aluminum, 0.08 gauge, bolted to a 2-inch galvanized steel pole. Potential: barrel, focusing nozzle, projectile shielding. Item: manhole cover. Material: cast iron, 90 kilograms. Potential: ballast, counterweight, blunt force projectile, inefficient. Environment: underpass. Structural supports are reinforced concrete. Air is saturated with flammable methane and other sewer gases from the villain's body. Any spark is a risk. Kakin's quirk is a liability. His brain, a supercomputer of frantic creation, processed the variables in a nanosecond. He couldn't fight the villain head-on. He couldn't pull Bakugo out. The heroes were proof of that. A frontal assault was suicide. Scattering the villain with an explosion would risk igniting the entire underpass, and it would only spread the sludge, making it impossible to contain. He needed a surgical strike. A way to force a momentary weakness. A way to make the villain flinch. His gaze locked onto the villain's large, floating yellow eyes. They were solid. They were a target. The plan coalesced in his mind, not as a series of steps, but as a single, complete blueprint. It was dangerous, reckless, and relied on a dozen variables aligning perfectly. It was the only option. Right. Izuku breathed, the single word of vow. No more standing around. He didn't charge in. He moved like a phantom. Pushing off the wall, he vaulted onto a news van, the crowd gasping as a green-hooded figure appeared out of nowhere. He didn't pause. He sprinted across the roof and leaped, not towards the villain, but towards the alley on the far side. Mid-air, his hand shot out and snagged the no parking sign, ripping the sheet of aluminum from its bolts with a sharp shriek of metal. He landed, rolled, and came up running, the sign clutched in one hand. He moved with the chaos, using the explosions and the panicked movements of the crowd as cover. He was a ghost in the machine of disaster. He slid past the corner where the crushed bicycle lay, his other hand grabbing the mangled frame. He didn't stop. With a burst of speed, he ran straight for the fire hydrant near Death Arms. "Kid! Get back! It's not safe!" the hero yelled, but Izuku ignored him. He dropped to one knee, the world narrowing to the task at hand. His quirk was screaming in his head, a torrent of data and intuition. The 10-second countdown began. Second 1 to 2, he slammed the bicycle frame onto the ground. With a horrifying crunch, he twisted the aluminum tubing, not breaking it, but reshaping it into a sturdy, tripod-like chassis. His fingers, a blur of motion, unhooked the bike's chain and wrapped it around two of the sprockets he'd salvaged. Second 3 to 4, he wrenched the heavy brass cap off the fire hydrant's pumper nozzle. It was tightened to spec, meant to be opened with a specialized wrench. Izuku's fingers found the microscopic stress points in the metal, and with a sharp, full-body twist, he broke the seal with a groan of protesting threads. A trickle of water escaped. Second 5 to 7, this was the crucial part. He took the aluminum sign and, using the edge of the curb as a makeshift anvil, began to fold it. He wasn't just bending it, he was creating a conical, rifled nozzle. The metal screamed as he folded it into a tight, vortex-inducing shape, his hands moving with the precision of a hydraulic press. He jammed the base of the cone into the hydrant's opening, creating a temporary, high-pressure seal. Second 8 to 9, he mounted the entire apparatus onto the bicycle frame chassis. He used the bike's chain and sprockets to create a crude but effective crank and gear system connected to the hydrant's main valve stem. He attached the leftover handlebar to the crank, creating a lever. The entire contraption was a Frankensteinian nightmare of plumbing and scrap metal, humming with potential energy. He mentally christened it the Cyclone. Second 10, the build was complete. He knelt behind the bizarre cannon, his hand on the crank. It was aimed not at the villain's body, but directly at its right eye. He took one steadying breath, the cool, detached focus of his quirk holding his panic at bay. He had one shot. "HUI, slime bag!" he screamed, his voice raw. The villain's eye swiveled towards him, annoyed. "Another worthless gnat? I'll deal with you after I'm done with this explosive little power-up." "You talk too much," Izuku grunted, and threw all his weight onto the crank. The hydrant's valve stem turned far faster than it was ever designed to. With a deep, resonant THOM, 75 psi of city water pressure surged into the chamber. It hit Izuku's hand-folded aluminum nozzle and was forced into a tight, spinning vortex. The result was not a stream of water. It was a screaming blade of high-pressure liquid, a miniature tornado turned on its side. It shrieked through the air, spinning so fast it looked like a solid drill bit of water. It struck the sludge villain's gelatinous eye with surgical precision. The villain didn't just feel pain, it felt a sensation it wasn't equipped to process. The focused, spinning jet of water didn't splash, it drilled. The solid eyeball ruptured with a wet, sickening pop. The villain let out a gurgling, agonized roar, its entire body convulsing in shock. Crucially, its grip slackened. For a single, vital second, the sludge holding Bakugo's head loosened. Bakugo, whose instincts were as sharp as his tongue, seized the opportunity. He arched his back, gasping in a huge, desperate lungful of air. "Die!" he roared, and with that fresh oxygen fueling him, he unleashed the biggest explosion he could manage. It wasn't aimed at the villain's body, but outwards, a concussive blast designed to push, not destroy. The combination was perfect. The villain, blind and reeling in pain, was already unstable. Bakugo's explosion acted as a powerful shove, destabilizing its liquid form. The sludge rippled and sloshed, losing its cohesion. It was the opening. The one they had all been waiting for. And at that exact moment, a shadow fell over the entire street. A booming, magnificent voice, dripping with power and hope, echoed from above. "Have no fear, for I am here." All Might landed. He didn't just touch down, he impacted, cracking the pavement beneath his feet. He was larger than life, a walking monument to heroism, his signature smile already fixed on his face. He took in the scene in a fraction of a second, the reeling villain, the freed hostage gasping for air, the pro-hero standing uselessly, and the strange, hooded boy next to a bizarre scrap metal contraption. He didn't have time for questions. He moved, a blur of red, white and blue. Detroit smash! His punch didn't even need to connect. He aimed it at the street just in front of the villain. The sheer air pressure of his blow was like a physical wall. It hit the destabilized sludge villain like a tsunami. The liquid body, already weakened, was blasted apart, splattering against the underpass walls in 100 different directions. The change in air pressure was so abrupt that the sky, which had been clear, suddenly clouded over. A light drizzle began to fall. He had changed the weather with a single punch. Silence descended, broken only by the patter of the newly formed rain and Bakugo's harsh, ragged coughing as he collapsed to his knees. All Might stood tall, one fist raised, a symbol of absolute victory. The crowd, silent for a moment in awe, erupted into thunderous applause. The media swarmed forward, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name. Izuku remained kneeling by his now useless machine. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. The cyclone, its purpose served, was already starting to look like what it was, a pile of junk. The water pressure was gone, the nozzle was bent out of shape from the force, and the bike frame was groaning under the strain. He looked over at Bakugo, who was being attended to by paramedics. Bakugo's wild eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on Izuku. He saw the green hoodie, then his gaze dropped to the bizarre water cannon. His expression was a volatile cocktail of anger, confusion, and something Izuku had never seen directed at him before, a flicker of grudging, horrified acknowledgement. Then the paramedics led him away. "You kid!" Izuku looked up. Death Arms was stomping towards him, his face a mask of righteous fury. Kamui Woods was right behind him. "What in the hell did you think you were doing?" Death Arms boomed, pointing an accusatory finger. "That was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed. You interfered with a hero operation. Your operation was watching a kid suffocate." Izuku shot back, the sarcastic shell reasserting itself now that the immediate danger was over. He got to his feet, his legs shaky. "My apologies for interrupting. Don't get smart with me," Kamui Wood snapped. "Your illegal use of a quirk and unapproved support gear, if you can even call that pile of garbage gear, put everyone in more danger. We had it under control. You had nothing under control," Izuku said, his voice flat and tired. He gestured to the street. "He was dying. I saw an opening. I took it. End of story. That's enough." The voice cut through the argument like a hot knife through butter. All Might strode towards them, his massive form eclipsing the other heroes. The reporters and their cameras followed him like pilot fish. "The boy was reckless, yes," All Might said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. "But he was also effective. His quick thinking created the opening I needed. He saw a solution where others only saw a problem." He turned his brilliant blue eyes, still smiling, onto Izuku. The full, blinding force of the number one hero's attention was a physical thing. "You acted when no one else would. You have the heart of a true hero, young man." Izuku's breath hitched. Praise. From All Might himself. It was everything his 5-year-old self had ever dreamed of. But his cynical teenage mind, the one forged in the fires of Bakugo's mockery, immediately threw up a shield. "He's just saying that for the cameras. Now if you'll excuse us," All Might continued, clapping a hand that was the size of a dinner plate onto Death Arm's shoulder, steering him away. "The situation is resolved. The press can get their statements from the police. He then turned back to Izuku, his voice dropping slightly so only he could hear. Young man. I'd like a word. In private. Before Izuku could process this, All Might gave him a wink, then addressed the ravenous press. Fear not, citizens. Everything is all right now. I must be off. And with a mighty leap, he was gone, a streak of color disappearing over the rooftops. The other heroes, grumbling but unwilling to argue with the symbol of peace, began dispersing the crowd. In the confusion, Izuku felt a firm hand on his shoulder. This way, kid. And try to keep up. It was All Might, who had apparently circled back in the blink of an eye. Before Izuku could protest, the hero scooped him up, tucking him under one arm like a folded newspaper. Hey! What are you? Put me down! Izuku protested, his cool demeanor shattering into undignified flailing. Relax! Just a short trip! All Might boomed, and with another earth-shaking leap, they were airborne. The city rushed by beneath them in a dizzying panorama. Izuku, a boy who was most comfortable surrounded by junk on the ground, felt a surge of vertigo. He squeezed his eyes shut, his heart trying to climb out of his throat. They landed a few moments later on a deserted rooftop, the sudden stop jolting every bone in his body. All Might set him down gently. Izuku stumbled, his legs feeling like jelly, and leaned against the rooftop access door to steady himself. Sorry about that, All Might said, his smile still impossibly wide. A bit of flair is necessary for the job, you know. But I must thank you. Truly. Your bravery was remarkable. Izuku caught his breath, pushing his hood back. He looked at his idol, the setting sun glinting off his iconic hair antennae. The praise still felt hollow. Performative. It wasn't bravery, Izuku said, his voice laced with the old, familiar cynicism. It was battlefield calculus. The odds of success were low, but the odds of success for doing nothing were zero. It was just a logical choice. All Might's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Logic? Young man, I saw you run into danger for someone else. That is the definition of heroism. He stood there for a moment, and then a strange sound began to emanate from him. A hissing, like a slow puncture. Poof! In an instant, the mountain of muscle and optimism was gone. In his place stood a man so skeletal he looked like a walking corpse. He was impossibly thin, his hero costume hanging off his bony frame like a shroud. His eyes were sunken into dark sockets, and his once heroic blonde hair hung down, limp and lifeless. He coughed, and a spray of blood emerged from his thin lips, which he wiped away with a gaunt hand. Izuku stared, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The entire world tilted on its axis. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. This emaciated scarecrow, this was All Might? The symbol of peace? The unbreakable pillar of society? The man coughed again. An ugly sight, I know. You get used to it. Sort of. Izuku's carefully constructed defenses, already battered, were annihilated. This wasn't just a crack in the facade. This was the whole building collapsing into a sinkhole. The cynical persona he wore wasn't a defense mechanism anymore. It was the only logical response to a universe this fundamentally broken. He finally found his voice, and it was dripping with a bitterness so profound it surprised even him. So even you can be broken? He asked, the word sharp and cruel. He gestured vaguely at All Might's withered form. The big, invincible symbol is just that? A bag of bones held together with a smile and a good PR team? He let out a short, harsh laugh that held no humor. Great. What hope is there for the rest of us? The words hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. All Might didn't flinch. He just sighed, a weary, rattling sound, and sat down on the rooftop ledge. I am broken, yes, he admitted, his voice now a quiet, tired rasp. He lifted his shirt, revealing a horrific scar that covered the left side of his torso. It was a swirling, cratered vortex of ruined flesh, a permanent testament to some cataclysmic injury. This happened about 5 years ago. A fight with a villain you've probably never heard of. It wasn't televised. He let the shirt fall. The fight cost me my stomach. My respiratory system is a wreck. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, I'm this. He gestured to himself. The symbol of peace is running on fumes, kid. Izuku just stared, his mind reeling. The implications were staggering. All Might, the foundation of their hero society, was a fragile, timed resource. The entire system was balanced on a knife's edge. Why? Izuku finally managed to ask. Why are you showing me this? To scare me straight? To tell me what happens to people who play hero without a license? No, All Might said, turning to look at him, his sunken eyes holding an unexpected intensity. I'm showing you this because of what I saw you do down there. When I saw you run in, this quirkless, reckless kid, I thought you were a fool. I was ready to step in and chew you out myself. He leaned forward. But then I saw what you were doing. You weren't just running. You were analyzing. You were building. You took a pile of garbage, a broken bicycle, a street sign, a fire hydrant, and in 10 seconds you created a tool perfectly designed for the situation. You didn't try to overpower the villain. You targeted its weakness with surgical precision. Any other hero, myself included, our first instinct would be to punch it. To smash the problem. You solved it. All Might stood up, walking slowly towards Izuku. For years I've been the sledgehammer that society needs to knock down its biggest walls. I smiled to reassure people and to hide the fear inside myself. But a sledgehammer can't fix a watch. It can't perform surgery. My power, one for all, is incredible. It is a beacon. But it is also a blunt instrument. He stopped in front of Izuku, looking down at him not as a symbol, but as a tired, desperate man. What you have, young man, your quirk. They call you a junker, don't they? Izuku flinched, the word hitting him like a physical blow. He just nodded, his gaze fixed on the concrete floor. They are fools, All Might said, his voice soft but firm. Absolute blind fools. You don't just see junk. You see potential. You see the parts inside the whole. You look at a scrap heap and you see a solution. You create hope from literal garbage. A hero's greatest tool isn't their fist, or their fire, or their speed. It's their mind. It's the will to see a path forward when everyone else sees a dead end. He took a deep, rattling breath. I'm at my limit. The embers of my power are fading. I have been searching for a successor. Someone to inherit my quirk, one for all. Someone to become the next pillar. He looked at Izuku, and in his sunken eyes, Izuku saw a flicker of the same light he saw in his own when a new design clicked into place. The light of possibility. I was looking for someone with a strong body and an unbreakable spirit. But after seeing you today, I wonder if I've been looking for the wrong thing. All Might's voice was filled with a dawning revelation. Power can be given. Strength can be built. But that mind of yours, that ability to create, to adapt, to see the world as a set of problems to be solved with whatever is at hand, that is a gift. That is true genius. He placed a skeletal hand on Izuku's shoulder. It felt surprisingly strong. Young man, I believe you have everything it takes to be a hero. More than anyone I've ever met. But I have to ask you, what could a mind like yours do, if it also had the power to change the world? The rooftop was a sanctuary of silence, suspended between the bruised twilight sky and the sprawling, glittering nervous system of the city below. The wind whispered over the gravel, a lonely sound that seemed to amplify the cavernous space between All Might's question and Izuku's stunned silence. What could a mind like yours do, if it also had the power to change the world? The words echoed in the hollows of Izuku's mind, refusing to be processed. He stared at the skeletal man before him, this fragile, broken vessel containing the brilliant, fading star that was All Might. The symbol of peace was offering him his power. A legacy. A sacred trust passed down through generations. And Izuku's first, overwhelming reaction was one of profound, biting suspicion. He took a step back, the motion sharp and defensive. A short, cynical laugh escaped his lips, devoid of any warmth. Let me get this straight, he began, his voice dripping with the sarcastic acid he used to protect himself. You spend the last 10 minutes giving me this big, dramatic speech about how my quirk is a work of true genius. How I'm this one-of-a-kind problem solver who sees the world in a way no one else does. He gestured between them, his hands slicing through the air. And now your grand solution is to offer to override it. To patch my supposedly unique operating system with your brute force legacy software? He shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips that was more of a grimace. Forgive me if I don't start weeping with gratitude. It feels a bit like a backhanded compliment. All Might, or rather, the man who was All Might, Toshinori Yagi, didn't get angry. He didn't even look surprised. He simply watched Izuku with those sunken, weary eyes, as if he had expected this exact reaction. It is not an overwrite, young Midoriya, Toshinori said, his voice a quiet rasp. It is an augmentation. A power amplifier. One for all is a peculiar quirk. It is a stockpiling power that can be passed from one person to the next. For most of its history it has been held by those who were quirkless, but on the rare occasion it has merged with an existing quirk, it has amplified it, elevated it to an unimaginable degree. Izuku's cynical expression wavered for a second. Amplified? He quickly stamped the flicker of curiosity down. So what? You want to turn my scalpel into a chainsaw? I don't need that. My quirk is about precision. It's about efficiency. It's about using the right tool for the job. Your power, no offense, he said, the words themselves a clear offense, is a sledgehammer. You see a problem, you smash it. It's effective, I'll grant you, but it's not smart. My quirk is a whole toolbox. Why would I trade a toolbox for a sledgehammer? This was the core of it. For his entire life, his quirk had been his curse and his secret pride. It was the thing that made him him. It was the reason Bakugo had spat the name Junker at him, the reason teachers had scolded him, the reason his mother worried. He had clung to its brilliance in secret, knowing that what he could do was special, even if no one else saw it. To accept one for all felt like a betrayal of that lonely, decade-long vigil. It felt like admitting, after all this time, that they were right. That his Junker quirk wasn't enough on its own. Toshinori listened patiently until Izuku had finished, his skeletal frame silhouetted against the last vestiges of daylight. You misunderstand what one for all is, he said softly, and you misunderstand what being the symbol of peace truly means. He gestured out at the city, a vast and endless tapestry of lights. Down there, right now, there are thousands of people who are afraid. People who lock their doors at night, who worry about walking home from work, who see a villain on the news and feel a knot of fear in their stomachs. My job, for the last 40 years, has not just been to defeat villains. It has been to quiet that fear. To be a pillar so strong and so absolute that just the sight of me makes people feel safe. He turned back to Izuku, his gaze intense. My smile? It's not just for the cameras. It's a shield for everyone else. It's a promise that everything will be okay. But I can't uphold that promise anymore. He gestured to his own withered body. This is the secret that, if it got out, would shatter the fragile peace I built. The symbol of peace is on a timer, young Midoriya, and when that timer runs out, the fear will come rushing back in. One for all isn't just power. It's the continuity of that promise. It's a legacy of hope. Izuku looked away, his jaw tight. The argument was compelling, but the personal slight still stung. Fine. It's a legacy. But it's your legacy. Why force it on me? Because of the sledgehammer and the toolbox, Toshinori replied, a faint spark of energy returning to his voice. You're right. I am a sledgehammer. An incredibly effective one, but a sledgehammer nonetheless. But you, imagine your toolbox, young Midoriya. Now imagine that toolbox is powered by a fusion reactor. The image struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow. His mind, which never truly rested, began to spin, the gears turning at an impossible speed. Think about it, Toshinori pressed, seeing the flicker of change in Izuku's eyes. Down there, at the underpass. You built that device in 10 seconds. It was brilliant. But you were limited. Limited by your own strength to carry the parts. Limited by the materials at hand. Limited by the time it took you to physically move from one place to another. Now imagine it with one for all. You need an engine block? You don't have to find a crane. You rip it out of a car with one hand. You need to bend rebar? You tie it into knots like it's yarn. You need to get from one side of a disaster zone to the other? You don't run. You leap, arriving in seconds with all the parts you've gathered along the way. Your mind sees the blueprint, And for the first time, your body has the overwhelming power to execute that blueprint on a scale you can't even comprehend right now. Toshinori was painting a picture, and against his will, Izuku's mind was filling in the colors. He didn't just see it, he visualized it. A building collapses. People are trapped. The heroes are trying to dig through the rubble. And then he arrives. He sees the fallen I-beams, the crushed concrete, the twisted plumbing. He doesn't just dig. He builds. In 30 seconds he assembles a massive, hydraulic lifting arm powered by his own strength, clearing tons of debris at once. He constructs reinforced safety cages around survivors, shoring up the structure as he moves. He's not just fighting the disaster. He's re-engineering it into a rescue operation. It's not about replacing your quirk. Toshinori's voice was almost a whisper now, hypnotic and full of potential. It's about removing its limits. You won't just be a man with a toolbox anymore. You would be a walking factory. A one-man industrial revolution. A hero who doesn't just stop villains, but rebuilds the world around him. A new kind of hero. A new kind of hope. Izuku's breath was shallow. The vision was intoxicating. It was everything he'd ever secretly dreamed his quirk could be, amplified 1,000 times over. He thought back to the sludge villain. His cyclone cannon had been a brilliant piece of improvisation. It created the opening. But it didn't end the fight. It didn't bring the rain. All Might had done that. His toolbox had been essential, but the sledgehammer had been decisive. What if he could be both? He looked at his hands. They were calloused and often dirty, stained with grease and marked by small cuts from sharp metal. They were the hands of a junker, a tinkerer. But they were also the hands that could see the secret language of the world, the connections between disparate parts. What if those hands also held the power to shatter mountains? The decision settled in his heart, not with a crash, but with a quiet, solid click, like the last part of a complex machine slotting perfectly into place. He met Toshinori's gaze, his own emerald eyes clear and resolved. The cynical smirk was gone, replaced by a look of grim determination. Okay, Izuku said, the single word hanging in the air. I'll do it. Toshinori's face broke into a wide, relieved smile, the first genuine smile Izuku had seen on his skeletal features. Excellent, my boy. I knew you'd see. But Izuku cut him off, holding up a hand. His face was set, resolute. On my terms. Toshinori blinked. Your terms? Yes, Izuku said firmly. Term 1, I'm not giving up my quirk. I'm not letting one for all override it or define me. It's a tool, a powerful, legacy-defining tool, but it's going into my toolbox, not the other way around. My mind, my methods come first. Term 2, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I'm not becoming the next All Might. I can't be. The world doesn't need a carbon copy of a hero who smiles through the pain. It needs something new. I'll be a hero, but I'll do it my way. With my name. With my style. He took a deep breath. And term 3, you're not just my benefactor. You're my mentor. You teach me about the power, and I. He faltered for a second, then found his footing. And I'll show you what it can really do. This is a partnership. Agreed? For a long moment, Toshinori just stared at him. Then, a low chuckle rumbled in his chest. It grew into a full, hearty laugh. A sound so full of life it seemed impossible coming from his withered frame. Agreed, young Midoriya, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. A partnership it is. I wouldn't have it any other way. I wasn't looking for a vessel. I was looking for a successor. He clapped Izuku on the shoulder, his hand firm and steady. Now, the UA entrance exam is in 10 months. We have a lot of work to do. Your mind is more than ready. But your body is a glass cannon. If you tried to channel one for all right now, your arms and legs would explode right off your torso. Izuku paled. Oh. Right. That. Indeed, Toshinori said with grim cheerfulness. So, our work begins at dawn. Meet me at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Izuku frowned. The illegal dumping ground? Why there? Toshinori's smile became predatory. Because, my boy, your first task is to restore that entire coastline to its former glory. It is the perfect training ground for a budding hero, and for a junker he left unsaid, but the implication was crystal clear. 10 months later, the first 3 months were hell. Pure, unadulterated, muscle-shredding hell. Dagobah Beach wasn't just a dumping ground. It was a coastal landfill, a metallic mountain range of society's forgotten refuse. Decades of neglect had turned a once beautiful stretch of sand into a hazardous monument to decay. Rusted cars, broken refrigerators, mountains of discarded electronics, and tangled nests of rebar choked the shoreline. And All Might, in his skeletal form, had a simple training plan for Izuku: move all of this. You're not serious, Izuku had said on that first morning, staring at a mountain of trash that seemed to have its own gravitational pull. Perfectly serious, Toshinori had chirped, sitting on a broken washing machine with a stopwatch. This is a hero's work. Community service, and more importantly, a way to train every muscle in your body to the breaking point and beyond. Now, start with that refrigerator. Izuku, all of 160 centimeters and 55 kilograms of him, had stared at the refrigerator. It stared back, a monolithic block of oxidized white enamel. His first attempt to move it resulted in him succeeding only in straining something in his lower back. His mind, his greatest asset, was useless here. It could tell him the refrigerator's precise weight, its material composition, the optimal leverage points to lift it, but his body simply could not provide the required force. It was infuriating. His brain was a Formula One engine trapped in the chassis of a rusty scooter. Even so, old habits died hard. His quirk was always on, a background process seeing the potential in the junk around him. Frustrated with a flimsy, store-bought wheelbarrow, he spent 20 minutes building a superior one out of a shopping cart frame and the wheels from a lawnmower, reinforcing the basin with sheet metal from a car door. Less building, more lifting, Toshinori would yell, though he watched with a curious eye. The days bled into a grueling routine. Wake before dawn. Run to the beach. Lift, pull, and drag impossibly heavy objects until his muscles screamed and his vision swam. His hands, already calloused, became tough as leather. His slim frame began to fill out, wiry muscle coiling over his bones. He ate the massive, protein-rich diet Toshinori prescribed and fell into bed each night in a state of near-total collapse, only to wake up and do it all again. It was a slow, agonizing process of forging his body into something that could withstand a hurricane. Then, around the 4th month, Toshinori changed the rules. All right, young Midoriya. Phase 2. He announced one afternoon as Izuku was struggling to haul a waterlogged sofa. Your body is adapting. Now let's engage your mind. Your challenge: you have 10 minutes. Build a working vehicle that can carry that refrigerator over there to the dumpster at the top of the beach access road. Izuku's eyes lit up, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. This was his language. A problem to be solved. A machine to be built. His first attempt was a disaster. He cobbled together a clumsy cart from an old axle and 4 mismatched tires, but his hastily constructed steering mechanism snapped, sending the refrigerator toppling into a pile of broken televisions. Failure! Toshinori called out gleefully. But a learning experience. What went wrong? Torsional stress on the primary steering column was too high for the material, Izuku muttered, already scanning the junk piles with a new, more critical eye. I need a stronger frame and a better power transfer system. His second attempt was a work of brutalist genius. He used the chassis of a rusted-out go-kart as his base. He found a small, single-cylinder engine from a gas-powered generator, and after 5 minutes of frantic, intuitive work, clearing the fuel line, checking the spark plug, rigging a pull start from a length of cord, he got it to sputter to life. He attached it to the go-kart's axle with a bicycle chain, creating a crude, belt-driven vehicle. He strapped the refrigerator to the back with old seatbelts. It was loud, it belched black smoke, and its steering was terrifyingly imprecise, but it worked. He triumphantly drove the sputtering contraption up the path, leaving a grinning Toshinori in a cloud of exhaust. The challenges grew more complex. Build a device that can sort this pile of mixed scrap into 3 bins: steel, aluminum, and copper. Izuku, panting from his morning workout, constructed a complex conveyor belt system with a massive electromagnet, salvaged from a junkyard crane's grapple, to pull out the ferrous metals, and then used a series of grates and manual levers to separate the rest by weight and size. One day, Toshinori simply started throwing things at him. A tire, a fender, a microwave. Defend yourself. Build a shield. Reactive construction. Izuku learned to move and build simultaneously. A thrown tire was met with a quickly assembled barrier made from a car hood. A volley of smaller scrap was deflected by a spinning shield he made from a satellite dish mounted on a powered hub. It was a dance of destruction and creation, forcing his mind and body to work in perfect, frantic sync. By the 8th month, Izuku was no longer just cleaning the beach. He was processing it. The final section of the beach was the worst, a veritable mountain of refuse piled 10 meters high. Moving it piece by piece would take years. This is your final exam, my boy, Toshinori said, standing before the trash mountain. Clear this. All of it. Before the entrance exam, Izuku didn't even look tired. He looked hungry. He spent a full day just walking the perimeter, his eyes glowing with that familiar internal light. He wasn't just looking at junk, he was taking inventory for the biggest build of his life. The next 2 months were a symphony of industrial creation. He started with the largest components he could find, the chassis of 2 city buses and a dump truck. He used his newfound strength to haul them into position, creating a massive, stable foundation. He salvaged 3 intact diesel engines and, with Toshinori watching in stunned silence, spent a week disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling them until they were in perfect working order. He constructed a massive, wide-mouthed scoop from the hull of a rusted fishing boat, attaching it to a hydraulic crane arm he built using the systems from a backhoe. He powered it with one of the diesel engines. He built a 10-meter-long, heavy-duty conveyor belt using rollers from an industrial printer and a track made from the treads of a disabled bulldozer. His masterpiece was the processor. It was a multi-stage machine. First, the crane would dump a load of trash onto the conveyor. The belt would carry it under a powerful electromagnet he'd spent days winding by hand, which would pull all the steel and iron onto a separate pile. The remaining trash would then fall into a massive rotating drum, a trommel screen he'd built from reinforced chain-link fence, which sorted the material by size. Finally, the largest, unsortable pieces were dropped into a hydraulic compactor he'd assembled from 2 industrial presses, which crushed them into manageable cubes. He had built a fully automated, diesel-powered material reclamation facility. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, 10 months to the day after he had first met All Might on that rooftop, the final piece of trash was crushed into a neat, dense cube. The beach was pristine. The sand, golden and clean, met the sparkling blue water for the first time in decades. The rising sun glinted off the ocean, and standing on the shoreline, next to his monstrous, beautiful machine, was Izuku Midoriya. He was transformed. The scrawny, cynical kid was gone. In his place stood a young man, still lean, but with the tightly coiled strength of a panther. His shoulders were broader, his jawline sharper, and his eyes held a new, unshakable confidence. Toshinori arrived, his skeletal form looking smaller than ever next to Izuku's colossal creation. He stared at the perfectly clean beach, then at the chugging, sorting, crushing machine. He was speechless. I asked you to clean a beach, young Midoriya, he said finally, his voice thick with awe. You industrialized it. Izuku just shrugged, wiping grease from his hands onto an old rag. It was inefficient to do it by hand. Toshinori let out a booming laugh. Inefficient. Of course. He walked over to Izuku, his face glowing with a pride that was almost painful to look at. You did it. You not only built your body into a worthy vessel, you exceeded every possible expectation. You are ready. He reached up and plucked a single strand of his iconic blonde hair. He held it out to Izuku. Now, for my part of the bargain. Izuku stared at the single hair, held between Toshinori's thumb and forefinger. He blinked. You're kidding, right? Not at all. Toshinori said cheerfully. To inherit my power, you must ingest some of my DNA. So, eat this. Izuku's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust, his wyldstyle persona coming back in full force. Are you serious? A hair? Couldn't you have put it in a smoothie or something? Baked it into a cake? This is just unhygienic. Stop complaining and eat it! Toshinori yelled, thrusting it forward. There's no time. The exam starts in 3 hours. With a long-suffering groan that summed up a decade of putting up with the world's absurdities, Izuku pinched the strand of hair, closed his eyes, and swallowed it. For a second, nothing happened. He just stood there, the salty taste of the air mixing with the profoundly weird sensation of having just eaten a piece of his childhood idol. Well, he said drily, that was distinctly anticlimactic, and then it hit him. It was not a warm glow. It was not a gentle surge. It was a supernova igniting in his bones. A tidal wave of raw, untamed energy crashed through every cell in his body. It was a billion lightning storms condensed into a single point and unleashed directly into his soul. He gasped, his eyes flying wide, the pupils dilating until they swallowed the emerald irises. He felt everything. The power of 1,000 suns roaring to life within him. The echo of past users, a chorus of faint, ghostly voices whispering in a language he couldn't understand. He felt their strength, their resolve, their sacrifices. It was a legacy not of parts, but of souls, a chain of light stretching back into darkness. But underneath it all, he felt something else. He felt his own quirk, his master builder ability, react to the influx. It had always been a quiet hum in the back of his mind, a constant stream of data. Now, that hum became a deafening roar. The world, which had always been a shimmering blueprint, was now rendered in impossible, high-definition clarity. He could see not just the components, but the atomic structures holding them together. He could feel the latent energy in every piece of scrap metal, the tension in every bolt. One for all wasn't overriding his quirk. It was plugging it into the core of a star. He stumbled back, falling to one knee, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The power was too much, a raging inferno contained in a vessel that was suddenly far too small, despite 10 months of brutal preparation. Toshinori steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. Breathe, my boy. Just breathe. Center yourself. It is a part of you now. You control it. It does not control you. Slowly, painfully, Izuku brought the maelstrom under control, wrestling the supernova back into a contained, throbbing star in his core. The roaring in his ears subsided to a powerful, rhythmic hum. He pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling with contained energy. He looked down at his hands. They were the same hands, stained with the same grease. But they felt different. They felt heavy, weighted with a power and a legacy he was only just beginning to comprehend. They were no longer just the hands of a junker who could build things from scraps. They were the hands of a builder who could now move mountains to get the parts he needed. A shiver of pure, unadulterated awe ran through him, followed immediately by a tremor of profound, heart-stopping fear. He looked at his hands, then up at the rising sun, a new era dawning both for the world and for him. He had the toolbox. Now, he had the sledgehammer. What have I done? He whispered. The gates of Yue High School were less an entrance, and more a statement. They towered over the prospective students, a grand, imposing archway of glass and steel that seemed to whisper, "You are not worthy." The sheer scale of it was designed to intimidate, to filter out the meek before the test even began. Most of the teenagers gathered before it were a bubbling cauldron of nervous energy, fidgeting, stretching, and muttering last-minute encouragements to themselves. Izuku Midoriya was not one of them. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, a solitary figure in a simple track suit, his green hoodie tied around his waist. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but his eyes were sharp and constantly moving. While others saw a daunting architectural marvel, Izuku saw a lattice of high-tensile steel, an array of laminated security glass panels, and a complex electro-hydraulic opening mechanism. It was impressive, he admitted, but it was just a thing that had been built. Everything could be unbuilt. A surge of power, a low-level thrumming deep in his core, reminded him of the new variable in his life's equation. One for all. It was a constant presence now, a contained star of kinetic potential waiting for a command. He had spent the last few hours in a state of intense meditation, not just calming his nerves, but wrestling this new, immense power into a state of semi-obedience. It was like trying to leash a thunderstorm. Even now, he could feel it tingling in his fingertips, begging to be released. Out of my way, junker. The voice was a familiar, abrasive growl that cut through the nervous chatter of the crowd. Izuku didn't even have to turn. He just tilted his head slightly as Katsuki Bakugo shouldered past him, deliberately bumping his shoulder. The impact was harder than usual, meant to shove him aside, but Izuku stood his ground, unmoving as a steel pylon. 10 months of hauling scrap had turned his body into a far more solid object than Bakugo was used to. Bakugo stumbled slightly from the unexpected resistance, his face twisting into a scowl of annoyance and surprise. He spun around, his red eyes narrowed. "You got a problem, Deku?" he snarled, the old nickname slipping out before the new one. "Not at all, Kaken," Izuku replied, his voice a cool, level baritone that was miles away from the stammering wreck Bakugo remembered. He met Bakugo's glare with an unblinking, analytical gaze, just enjoying the architecture. Though the load-bearing columns seem a bit over-engineered for the weight they're supporting. Inefficient. Bakugo's jaw tightened. This wasn't the Deku he knew. The terrified, muttering waste of space who would flinch if you looked at him too hard was gone. This person was calm. Composed. Annoyingly detached. It set Bakugo's teeth on edge more than any of Izuku's old fearful babbling ever had. He scanned Izuku up and down, taking in the wiry strength in his frame, the quiet confidence in his stance. Something had changed. Drastically. "Don't get cocky just cause you got lucky with that sludge prick," Bakugo hissed, lowering his voice. "Whatever stupid water gun you built, it's nothing. You're still just a garbage picker who got in the way. Don't think for a second you belong here." "I don't think I belong here," Izuku said, turning to face him fully. A small, infuriatingly calm smirk touched his lips. "I'm going to prove it." Before Bakugo could formulate a suitably explosive retort, the booming voice of President Mike echoed from the school's speakers, startling the crowd. "All right, listen up, little listeners. Welcome to the UA entrance exam." "Give me a yeah." Silence. "Tough crowd." President Mike continued undeterred. The massive gates began to slide open with a low hum. "The practical exam is about to begin. There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run! Run!" The mass of students stood frozen for a beat, confused. Then, a few at the front bolted, and the dam broke. The crowd surged forward in a chaotic stampede. Bakugo shot Izuku one last glare, then blasted off into the testing ground, his explosions propelling him ahead of the pack. Izuku didn't run. He took one deep breath, centering himself. The hum of One for All in his veins intensified. He let a minuscule, controlled trickle of that power flow into his legs. It felt like uncorking a volcano. With a single, explosive push, he launched himself forward, a green and black blur that shot past the running mob. He landed 50 meters into the city replica, his sneakers skidding on the asphalt. He was in. The city was his. And it was a playground made of parts. The exam grounds were a sprawling, detailed cityscape, a labyrinth of concrete canyons and steel towers. As soon as he was clear of the entrance, the first opponent appeared. A one-point villain bot, a squat, green machine on a single tread, rolled out from an alley, its red optical sensor locking onto him. "Target acquired. Engaging." Its synthesized voice droned. Most students would have attacked it head-on. Izuku didn't even look at it directly. His eyes were already scanning his surroundings. Asphalt. Concrete sidewalk. Steel-reinforced lamppost. Aluminum trash can. Broken piping. The robot charged. Izuku moved. He performed a quick, acrobatic flip onto the sidewalk, his hands slapping down on the concrete. He didn't just touch it. His quirk, amplified by a flicker of One for All, allowed him to perceive the internal structure. With a sharp, focused pull, he ripped a meter-long chunk of rebar from within the concrete itself, as if pulling a loose thread from cloth. He landed, spun, and jammed the rebar into the robot's single tread, stopping it dead. The bot whirred, its tread grinding uselessly against the steel rod. It was immobilized. Izuku was already moving on before it had finished processing its own disablement. 1 point. He hadn't wasted a single calorie of OFA's real power. Efficiency. He sprinted down the street, his mind a whirlwind of creative destruction. He wasn't just looking for robots. He was looking for opportunities. A pair of two-pointers rolled into view, flanking him. They raised their cannon arms. Izuku's eyes darted to the side of the building. A fire escape. He leaped, his OFA-enhanced jump carrying him effortlessly to the second-story landing. As the robots fired, their laser blasts searing the spot where he'd just been, Izuku was already at work. His hands became a blur. In less than 3 seconds he wrenched a section of the steel railing free, bent it into a parabolic curve, and ripped a polished metal hubcap off a nearby junker car he'd spotted. He vaulted off the fire escape, holding his creation. The robots reacquired him as a target. Improvised directional energy reflector. He muttered to himself, a habit he hadn't quite shaken. He angled the hubcap and railing shield just as the two-pointers fired again. The polished surface of the hubcap, reinforced by the bent steel, caught the first laser blast. The parabolic shape did the rest. The beam ricocheted at a sharp angle and slammed directly into the other robot, blowing its head clean off. The first robot, confused, swiveled its head. Izuku was already on it. He landed on its shoulder, reached down, and with a sharp twist, tore a handful of brightly colored wires from a maintenance panel. The robot sparked, seized, and fell silent. 2 bots down. 3 points. Total time, 8 seconds. This became his rhythm. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of scrap and ingenuity. He didn't smash. He dismantled. He disabled. He turned the battlefield against itself. He saw a cluster of three-pointers, the most dangerous of the standard bots, preparing to ambush a group of students. They were heavily armored, designed to be taken down by powerful, direct-hit quirks. A frontal assault would be a waste of energy. Izuku ducked into an alley filled with discarded electronics. His eyes glowed. Capacitors. Wiring. Emitters. Perfect. His hands moved in a blur, stripping parts from broken air conditioners and microwaves. He wasn't building a weapon. He was building a key. He emerged from the alley and slid to a halt. "Hey, tin cans!" he yelled. The three-pointers turned their heavy cannons towards him. As they did, he held up the device he'd made. It was a messy ball of wires, circuitry, and a salvaged microwave magnetron, all held together with electrical tape and sheer force of will. He channeled a tiny, precise pulse of one for all into it, not as kinetic force, but as raw electrical energy. The device let out a high-pitched whine and a brilliant blue flash. A focused electromagnetic pulse washed over the three-pointers. Their optical sensors flickered. Their limbs seized. Their internal targeting systems crashed. They froze in place, completely inert. An EMP grenade, built in 5 seconds from garbage. 9 points. He ran on, a ghost in the machine, leaving a trail of creatively disabled robots in his wake. He repurposed their own armor plating into razor-sharp caltrops to shred the treads of their reinforcements. He built a powerful, single-shot railgun using magnets from a wrecked train car and a discarded I-beam as the projectile, taking out a distant three-pointer from a block away. He was racking up points at an astonishing rate, but he wasn't even the main topic of conversation in the observation room. The other students' flashy, explosive quirks were far more camera-friendly. In the darkened monitoring room, a group of pro-heroes watched the dozens of screens, offering commentary. "That explosive kid, Bakugo, is a real powerhouse. He's a natural-born combatant," one hero noted. "Indeed," said another. "And the girl with the engine legs from Semi Academy is impressive. Her mobility is top-notch." A small, creature of indeterminate species in a dapper suit, Principal Nizu, sipped his tea. "They are all quite promising. But has anyone been tracking examinee 7111? Aizawa Shota, a man who looked like he had just woken up from a week-long nap in a laundry hamper, grunted. He tapped a few keys, bringing a new screen to the forefront. It showed a bird's-eye view of Izuku's sector. The screen was littered with dozens of grayed-out icons, indicating disabled but not destroyed robots. Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, Master Builder, Aizawa read off the file in a monotone drone. The junker kid from Aldera. He's not destroying them. He's dissecting them. Look at this. He zoomed in on a clip of Izuku turning one robot's laser against its partner. Tactical. Efficient. Almost zero property damage. He sees the entire field as a resource. He's not fighting the test, he's solving it. Nise's whiskers twitched in a smile. Oh, I am aware. I've been watching him since he started. He thinks in a way that is beautifully, wonderfully, chaotically logical. He's going to be a fascinating student. Aizawa just grunted again, but a flicker of genuine interest showed in his tired eyes. Back in the city, Izuku was nearing the center of the arena. He had lost count of his points, but he knew it was a respectable number. He was just starting to think about hunting down a few more three-pointers when the ground began to shake. A deep, groaning tremor ran through the street. Dust rained down from the tops of the buildings. The other examinees, who had been engaged in their own frantic battles, all stopped and stared in the same direction. A shadow fell over the city, rising from behind a block of buildings, so colossal it dwarfed the skyscrapers, was the zero-pointer. It was a Goliath of green and black steel, a walking apocalypse of a machine. Its head was a solid block of armor, its single red eye the size of a bus. Its arms were as thick as subway tunnels, ending in massive, multi-fingered claws. It was designed to be an obstacle, not an opponent. A force of nature to be avoided. Its purpose was to induce panic, to test the student's ability to judge risk and retreat. Welp, that's my cue, Izuku said aloud, turning to jog in the opposite direction. There were no points for fighting it. It was a waste of time and energy. The smart play was to leave and hunt for smaller prey. It was the logical, efficient choice. He took 3 steps. Aya! My leg! The cry of pain cut through the rumble of the approaching machine. Izuku froze. He looked back. There, not 50 meters from the zero-pointer's path, was the girl with the kind, round face he'd seen at the entrance. The one with the gravity quirk. Her name was Uraraka Ochako. A slab of concrete, dislodged by the tremors, had pinned her leg to the ground. She was struggling, her face pale with pain and terror, as the colossal robot stomped closer, each footstep shaking the very foundations of the city. The other students were already running, a tide of self-preservation flowing away from the danger. They saw her, but fear was a powerful motivator. No one was stopping. Izuku watched them flee. He looked at the girl, trapped and helpless. He looked at the approaching zero-pointer, an insurmountable, zero-point problem, and in that moment, efficiency and logic went out the window. The cynical, detached persona he wore, the wyldstyle attitude that had protected him for so long, evaporated like mist in the face of true, imminent danger to another person. The core of him, the part that had watched All Might videos with wide-eyed wonder, the part that had run headfirst towards the sludge villain, took control. Tashinori's voice echoed in his memory. You have the heart of a true hero, young man. Damn it! Izuku swore under his breath. He spun on his heel and sprinted towards the danger. His mind, now fueled by a desperate, heroic urgency, kicked into a higher gear. He wasn't thinking about points anymore. He was thinking about survival. Hers. Problem 1. Immediate danger to victim is falling debris, not the robot itself. Solution. Localized structural reinforcement. He reached the rubble around Uraraka in seconds. His eyes scanned the wreckage. Fallen I-beams from a building's framework. Slabs of broken concrete. Twisted rebar. Don't move! I've got you! He yelled, his voice sharp and commanding. Uraraka looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. But the robot! One problem at a time. He snapped back, already at work. The next 5 seconds were a blur of impossible construction. He didn't even feel the strain as he heaved a massive I-beam into place, his muscles screaming with a contained surge of one for all. He ripped another beam from the rubble and slammed it down, creating a cross brace. He grabbed jagged slabs of concrete and slotted them into the frame, his quirk showing him the perfect way to fit them together like a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. He wove rebar through the gaps, creating a dense, reinforced mesh. He wasn't building a wall. He was building a bunker. A safety cage. A crude but incredibly strong protective shell directly over the spot where Uraraka was trapped. He left a small crawl space for her to be pulled out of later. He stepped back, his chest heaving. The reinforced cage stood strong, a brutalist monument to his frantic ingenuity. It would protect her from anything short of a direct hit. He had bought her time. Now for problem 2. The big one. He turned to face the zero-pointer. It was closer now, so close that its shadow completely eclipsed him. It loomed over the street, its massive red eye scanning the area, utterly indifferent to the small human standing in its path. Izuku looked at his hands. He felt the raging star of one for all thrumming in his core, a power meant to be a sledgehammer. He looked at the city around him, a landscape of raw materials, his toolbox. The sledgehammer and the toolbox. Tashinori's voice again. Imagine your toolbox, but powered by a fusion reactor. A wild, terrifying, brilliant grin spread across Izuku's face. It was not the calm smirk of his usual persona. This was the grin of a mad scientist who had just solved the final equation. Okay, big guy, he yelled up at the colossal machine, his voice filled with a manic energy. Let's dance. This wouldn't be a simple build. This would be his masterpiece. His magnum opus of improvised destruction. He channeled one for all into his legs and launched. He didn't just run. He became a ricocheting bullet, caroming off the sides of buildings. His mind was a supercomputer processing terabytes of data per second. He was gathering parts. First pass, he shot past the wreckage of the 3-pointers he'd disabled. With a series of lightning-fast movements, he ripped the heavy cannon barrels from their chassis. Fa made the reinforced steel feel like cardboard. Second pass, he landed in the train yard where he'd launched his earlier railgun attack. He tore up a 10-meter section of railway track, hoisting the multi-ton piece of steel onto his shoulder as if it were a wooden plank. Third pass, he leaped to the roof of a 5-story building, where a large, industrial HVAC unit sat. He didn't just take parts, he took the whole thing, ripping the 2-ton machine from its moorings. He ripped out its powerful rotary fans and massive copper cooling coils. He landed back in the middle of the street, surrounded by his horde of high-grade components. The zero-pointer was only a block away now, its footsteps like thunder. He had maybe 20 seconds. He didn't need it. Okay, let's get creative, he breathed, and the world dissolved into the pure, ecstatic hum of creation. Seconds 1 to 4, he slammed the railway track into the asphalt, driving it 3 meters deep to create an unshakable foundation. With OFA-powered hands he bent the thick steel into a massive, U-shaped cradle. Seconds 5 to 9, he mounted the HVAC unit into the cradle. He tore it open, his hands a blur, rewiring the rotary fans, reversing their polarity. He jury-rigged the cannon barrels he'd collected, attaching them to the front of the fans, creating a series of focused airflow chambers. Seconds 10 to 13, he wove the copper cooling coils into a massive, dense projectile, packing it with chunks of concrete and scrap metal he tore from the street around him. The result was an ugly, brutally dense slug of metal and rock, weighing several tons. He loaded it into the main cannon assembly. Seconds 14 to 15, the final, crucial step. He tore the engine block out of a nearby bus, his fingers phasing through the metal to find the connections. He ripped out the alternator and starter motor, and in a shower of sparks, he hot-wired them directly to the HVAC's rotary system. He had created a power source. The finished product was an abomination of engineering. A grotesque, multi-stage kinetic cannon. It was a weapon built from the city's guts, a testament to pure, chaotic function over form. The zero-pointer raised its massive arm, preparing to smash the building next to Izuku. Its red eye fixed on him, finally identifying him as a threat. Izuku stood at the back of his cannon, his legs braced, his right arm cocked back. Green lightning, the raw, untamed energy of One for All, began to crackle around him, arcing from his body to the metal of his creation. All right, you walking skyscraper, he grunted, the power building to an almost unbearable crescendo. Let's see how you handle a kinetic transfer. He didn't fire a trigger. He didn't press a button. He became the firing pin. With a roar that ripped from his throat, he punched the back of the cannon. Recycle smash! He poured a full, uncontrolled 100% of a One for All smash directly into his machine. The cannon didn't just fire. It detonated. The starter motor screamed as it drew on the raw power, spinning the reverse rotary fans to impossible speeds. The focused jets of air, compressed by the cannon barrels, acted as a first-stage propellant, launching the massive copper and concrete slug forward. But the real force was the kinetic transfer from Izuku's punch. The energy didn't just push the cannon, it traveled through the structure, a shockwave of pure power that slammed into the projectile at the exact moment of firing. The result was a sound that broke the sky. A deafening crack boom that was part sonic boom, part thunderclap. The multi-ton slug was launched forward not at the speed of a cannonball, but at the speed of a meteor. It left a shimmering trail of displaced air in its wake as it tore across the block in a fraction of a second. It hit the zero-pointer square in the head. The robot's heavy armor, designed to withstand tank shells, might as well have been wet paper. The projectile didn't just dent it. It punched straight through, taking the entire head and neck assembly with it in a cataclysmic explosion of green steel and red wiring. The colossal, headless body of the zero-pointer stood motionless for a second, a silent monument to its own demise. Then, with a slow, grinding groan of stressed metal, it began to tilt backward, away from Izuku and Uraraka. It crashed down blocks away, sending up a plume of dust that rose to the sky. Back in the street, the recoil from the cannon was almost as violent as the launch. The massive machine, its purpose served, flew backward and shattered into its component parts, scattering across the pavement. It was junk once more. Izuku was thrown back by the force of his own punch. He landed hard, skidding across the asphalt. He pushed himself up, breathing heavily. He looked at his right arm. It was glowing a furious, angry red, broken in at least 3 places. Searing, white-hot pain shot through him, but it was distant, muffled by the overwhelming rush of adrenaline. He had done it. The buzzer sounded across the city, signaling the end of the exam. Silence fell, broken only by the distant groaning of stressed metal. Izuku pushed himself to his feet, cradling his broken arm. He stumbled over to the safety cage he'd built. "You okay in there?" he called out, his voice hoarse. A moment later, Uraraka crawled out from the small opening he'd left. She was covered in dust, but miraculously unharmed. She looked at him, then at his glowing, shattered arm, then at the headless, smoking giant collapsed in the distance. Her eyes were wide with utter, complete disbelief. You did that?" she whispered, her voice full of awe. "Seemed like the efficient solution," Izuku managed to say, before a wave of nausea from the pain hit him. His legs gave out, and the world tilted, darkness closing in at the edges of his vision. He collapsed onto the broken street, the last thing he saw being Uraraka's panicked face as she rushed towards him. His final, conscious thought was not one of triumph, but of weary, pained calculation. Note to self, One for All has one hell of a kickback. Need to build a better recoil dampener. And maybe, a splint. The acceptance letter from Yue hadn't been a letter. It had been a small, sleek data chip that, when inserted into his computer, projected a hologram of All Might. The number 1 hero, in his full muscle form, had boomed his congratulations, explaining Izuku's point tally with dramatic flair. "Young Midoriya! Not only did you pass, you shattered the record. With 60 villain points, you were already at the top of the leaderboard." All Might had declared, his holographic image gesturing wildly. "But then came the secret component. Rescue points. For saving young Uraraka and for your unprecedented, and I must say, spectacularly over the top, takedown of the zero-pointer, you have been awarded 60 rescue points, giving you a grand total of 120 points. Welcome, my boy, to your Hero Academia." Izuku had watched the entire projection with a deadpan expression, his right arm encased in a state-of-the-art cast provided by Recovery Girl. He'd woken up in the nurse's office to her scolding him about self-destructive tendencies before planting a kiss on his cheek that had knitted his bones back together with an unsettling, itchy speed. His mother had wept with joy. Tashinori, in his skeletal form, had visited later, beaming with a pride so intense it seemed to temporarily add meat to his bones. Izuku's own reaction had been a quiet, internal nod of satisfaction. The plan had worked. Step 1 was complete. Now, stepping through the massive doorway of Class 1A, a door oversized to accommodate students with diverse and often bulky quirks, he felt a different kind of pressure. The entrance exam was chaos, his natural habitat. This was structure. This was a classroom. It was a system, and systems, in his experience, were often inefficient and full of arbitrary rules. He scanned the room, his master builder quirk a low hum in the back of his mind. It wasn't just analyzing materials anymore. It was analyzing people. He saw Bakugo, already with his feet propped up on his desk, radiating an aura of belligerent entitlement. He saw the tall, broad-shouldered student with glasses and dark blue hair moving with the rigid, precise motions of a well-oiled machine, currently in the middle of scolding Bakugo for disrespecting school property. Examinee 73 Tenya Ida. Izuku's mind supplied, recalling faces from the exam orientation. Quark engine. Internal combustion engines in his calves. High-speed mobility. Personality profile. Rigid, rule-oriented, likely to clash with non-standard methodologies. Potential for friction high. Izuku ignored both of them, his gaze sweeping the room for his designated seat. He moved with a quiet, confident economy of motion, his newfound physical prowess making him seem to glide where others would walk. His presence was a subtle disturbance in the classroom's ecosystem. He wasn't loud like Bakugo or rigid like Ida, but he had an intensity, a focused aura that made a few heads turn. As he made his way to his desk, he heard a familiar, cheerful voice. "Oh, it's you! The crazy build-a-cannon guy." He turned to see Uraraka Ochako, the girl he'd rescued, bouncing on the balls of her feet by her desk. Her round face was lit up with a huge, genuine smile. "They didn't tell me your name," she said, her energy infectious. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. First you build that awesome cage thingy, and then, boom, you just took that giant robot apart. My name's Uraraka Ochako. It's nice to meet you properly." Izuku offered a small, polite nod. The cool, detached persona was his default setting in social situations. Midoriya Izuku. The cage was a temporary load-bearing structure, necessary to prevent injury from cascading structural failures. The cannon. He paused, a flicker of that mad scientist grin from the exam briefly touching his lips. Was a calculated over-response. Uraraka blinked, her head tilting. A calculated over-response? The goal was to neutralize the threat in a way that guaranteed zero chance of collateral damage to you. The most efficient method was total threat elimination via overwhelming kinetic force. Before Uraraka could process this deeply nerdy explanation, Ida marched over to their position, his hand chopping the air with stiff precision. "Midoriya-kun, I must commend you as well," he declared, his voice booming. "Although your methods were unorthodox and your disregard for the exam's scoring parameters was clear, you correctly identified the true nature of the test. You understood that it was a measure of heroic spirit. I was completely blindsided. I misjudged you, and for that, I offer my sincerest apologies." He finished with a perfect 90-degree bow. Izuku just stared at him. "I didn't understand the true nature of the test. I saw someone in danger and acted accordingly. The heroic spirit part was an unintentional byproduct of logical threat assessment." Ida straightened up, looking slightly baffled, as if Izuku had just explained physics to him in a foreign language. The conversation was mercifully cut short by the arrival of their teacher. A man who looked like a caterpillar in a yellow sleeping bag wriggled his way into the room, unzipped himself, and stood before them. He was tall, gaunt, with tired, bloodshot eyes and a scarf that seemed to have a life of its own. "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down," Shota Aizawa said, his voice a dry, emotionless monotone. "That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. You're not here to make friends." He took a long, slow sip from a juice pouch. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleasure to meet you." The class was stunned into silence. "Right, let's get to it," Aizawa continued, pulling a set of gym uniforms from his sleeping bag. "Put these on and meet me on the field." The pea grounds were vast, the manicured grass a stark contrast to the chaotic cityscape of the exam. The 20 students of Class 1A stood in a nervous line, clad in their new blue and white UA tracksuits. "A quirk assessment test?" Uraraka asked, confused. "But what about the entrance ceremony? And orientation?" "No time for that," Aizawa grunted, his gaze sweeping over them, cold and unimpressed. "UA isn't a normal school. We run things our own way here. You've been using your quirks in unregulated environments your whole lives. Here, you'll learn control, precision, and application under sanctioned conditions." He turned to Bakugo. "Bakugo, You finished first in the practical exam. What was your best softball throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo replied, a cocky smirk on his face. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. Do whatever you want, as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo strode into the throwing circle, a predator sensing an opportunity to establish dominance. He wound up, a wide grin stretching across his face. Dai! He screamed, launching the ball with a massive, perfectly timed explosion. The ball became a comet, soaring through the air with a deafening boom. Aizawa watched the tablet in his hand. He turned it to show the class. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excited gasps. Awesome! That's what I'm talking about. This is gonna be fun. Aizawa's face darkened. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Fun? He said, the word dripping with venom. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun? His hair began to float, his eyes glowing a menacing red. Right. The student who finishes last in these 8 tests will be judged to have 0 potential, and will be expelled immediately. A wave of panic washed over the class. Expelled? On the first day? This was a ruse, right? A logical ruse to get them to try their best. Izuku analyzed Aizawa's posture, his tone, the look in his eyes. Conclusion, not a ruse. Threat level, credible. Logical ruse fallacy. Izuku thought. The assumption that an extreme negative incentive is merely motivational. This teacher is a pragmatist. He's weeding out the weak. Okay. New objective, don't be last. The tests began. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Students were paired off. Ida, with his engine quirk, was a blur, finishing in 3.04 seconds. Ajutsuyu, the frog-like girl, used her powerful legs to bound across in 5.58 seconds. Izuku was paired against a boy with a tail. He stepped up to the starting line, his eyes scanning the area. It was a standard running track. The materials were mundane, tartan track surface, painted lines, the starting block itself. Not much to work with, but then his gaze drifted past the finish line, to the chain-link fence at the edge of the field. And next to the fence, a groundskeeper's shed. Inside, he could just make out, yes, a reel of nylon rope and a compressed air tank for cleaning equipment. Perfect. As the starting pistol fired, Izuku didn't sprint. He took 3 quick steps, his hands already a blur. He reached down and tore a section of the metal starting block free. In the 2 seconds it took for his opponent to get up to speed, Izuku had already built his device. He'd fashioned the metal into a C-shaped clamp with a simple trigger mechanism. He'd visualized the rope from the shed, and his quirk, enhanced by a whisper of OFA's spatial awareness, allowed him to mentally grab it. The rope snaked out from the shed, across the field, and into his hand with impossible speed. He looped it into the clamp. He then did the same with the nozzle from the compressed air tank, attaching it to the back of his device. He aimed at the chain-link fence 50 meters away. He pulled the trigger. With a loud whoosh, a blast of compressed air propelled the C-clamp forward. It shot across the field like a missile, the nylon rope trailing behind it. The clamp hit the fence and snapped shut, securing itself. Izuku, still holding the other end of the rope and the air nozzle, then did the reverse. He aimed the nozzle behind him and released another, more powerful blast of compressed air. It acted as a jet, propelling him forward. The rope acted as a guide wire. He didn't run the 50-meter dash. He zipped across it like a commando on an urban assault course. He crossed the finish line in 4.13 seconds. He landed, the device already falling apart in his hands, its purpose served. The class stared, dumbfounded. Aizawa just grunted, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his tired eyes. Improvised grappling hook propulsion. Unorthodox. But within the rules. Ida looked horrified. But he didn't run. He used a support item. That's cheating. He built the item on the spot from materials in the environment, Aizawa corrected without looking up from his tablet. That's his quirk. The rules are do whatever you want. He did. Next, Test 2, Grip Strength. A standard grip strength dynamometer was passed around. The octopus-armed shoji recorded a massive 540 kilograms by using multiple limbs. Izuku took the device. He looked at it, then at his hand. He could channel OFA into his grip, but that felt crude, uninspired. Instead, he held the device in his left hand. With his right, he reached down and tore up a small chunk of the asphalt track. In his palm, the rock and tar morphed. He built a small, intricate series of gears and levers around his fingers, a miniature exoskeleton that fit over his knuckles. It was a torque-multiplying clamp. He placed his augmented hand over the dynamometer's grip and squeezed. The gears whirred, multiplying the force of his normal grip by a factor of 10. The device's digital screen shot up rapidly before shorting out with a sad little bzzzt. The needle on the analog backup dial bent hard against the maximum reading. He handed the broken device back to a stunned Aizawa. It appears the maximum measurable force has been exceeded, Izuku stated calmly. The internal strain gauge wasn't designed for compound leverage. Aizawa took the busted machine, looked at it, then looked at Izuku. He didn't say a word, just made a note on his tablet. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo used his explosions to blast his way across the entire sandbox. Azure used her frog leap. Izuku's approach was simpler. He stood at the edge, bent his knees, and for the first time, let a small, controlled 5% of one for all flood his legs. He jumped. He didn't just cross the sandbox. He cleared the entire pea field, landing lightly on the grass on the far side, leaving 2 small cracks in the ground from his takeoff. He jogged back, his face impassive, as the class stared in silence. Bakugo's eye was twitching. That wasn't his quirk. What the hell was that? Test 4, repeated sidesteps. The short, purple-haired boy Mineta used his sticky balls to create a bouncy, elastic barrier that he ricocheted between at high speed. It was surprisingly effective. Izuku, seeing this, decided on a different approach. He tore up 2 manhole covers from a nearby service access path. He stood between them, and using OFA for rapid, piston-like arm movements, simply bashed himself back and forth between the 2 heavy iron discs, which he held in place with his feet. It was brutal, jarring, and incredibly fast. By now, the class was starting to get it. Midoriya didn't just have a quirk. He had a completely different operating system. He didn't see the tests as physical trials. He saw them as engineering problems with unconventional solutions. Finally came the ball throw. The main event. The one that had set the initial benchmark. One by one, the students took their turns. Uraraka, with a smile, touched the ball, activated her zero-gravity quirk, and tapped it. It floated gently upwards, continuing on into the sky. Aizawa's tablet beeped. Infinity. The class was in awe. Infinity? Awesome! Izuku stepped into the circle. The memory of his first quirk manifestation, the carousel, the mockery, the name Junker, flashed in his mind. This was the same scenario. A chance to show what he could do, but this time, he wasn't a scared little boy. And he had a fusion reactor in his veins. He looked at the ball in his hand. Tossing it with one for all would be easy. He could probably send it into orbit. But that was All Might's way. The sledgehammer. He needed to show his way. The toolbox. He dropped the ball for a moment. He turned and walked over to a pile of discarded groundskeeping equipment, a broken lawnmower, a leaf blower with a seized engine, and a metal drum barrel. What's he doing now? Someone whispered. Izuku didn't answer. He was in the zone. His hands became a blur, a symphony of destructive creation. Seconds 1 to 3. He ripped the engine from the lawnmower and the fan assembly from the leaf blower. He tore the metal drum barrel in half lengthwise with a shriek of protesting metal. Seconds 4 to 7. He mounted the engine to one half of the drum, creating a base. He attached the fan assembly to the engine's drive shaft, but he reversed it, so it would create a powerful pull, not a push. He fashioned the other half of the drum into a long, curved barrel, creating a sealed channel. Seconds 8 to 10. He built a simple clutch mechanism from the lawnmower's gears and attached a ripcord. He placed the softball into a small cup at the base of the barrel, right in front of the reverse fan. He stepped back, breathing a little heavily. Before him stood a crude, ugly, but functionally perfect centrifugal launcher. He picked up the ripcord. He looked at Aizawa, who was watching with an unnervingly neutral expression. Is this within the rules? Izuku asked. Aizawa shrugged. You built it. It's an extension of your quirk. Launch it. Izuku grinned. This was the fun part. He yanked the ripcord. The lawnmower engine sputtered to life with a deafening roar. The reverse fan assembly began to spin, creating a powerful vacuum inside the barrel. The softball, held in its cup, began to vibrate, then spin, faster and faster, a white blur trapped in a metal cage. The whine of the spinning ball climbed higher and higher. The entire machine was shaking, threatening to tear itself apart. Okay, Izuku muttered. Now for a little boost. He placed his hand on the base of the launcher and channeled a tiny, hair-thin stream of one for all into the machine. Not kinetic force, but pure vibrational energy. The energy flowed into the spinning assembly. The whine became a piercing, deafening shriek that made the other students cover their ears. The air around the launcher began to shimmer with heat. Then, with a final, practice motion, Izuku hit the clutch release he'd built. The cup holding the ball retracted. The ball, now spinning at several thousand RPM and supercharged with vibrational energy, was released into the curved barrel. It shot up the ramp and launched into the air. It didn't fly. It didn't soar. It screamed. The spin was so intense that the ball acted like a gyroscope, resisting gravity's pull for far longer than it should have. It tore through the air with a sound like a hornet the size of a jet engine, a white speck disappearing into the upper atmosphere. Aizawa stared at his tablet. He waited. And waited. The ball was still going, climbing higher and higher, a tiny dot against the blue. Finally, the tablet beeped, the same sound it had made for Uraraka. He turned the screen to the class. It read, Infinity 1. The class was dead silent. What did that even mean? How do you get more than infinity? Bakugo's face was a thunderous mask of pure, unadulterated rage and confusion. He had put everything into his throw. It was a demonstration of pure, overwhelming power, and this junker had just broken physics with a pile of garbage and some fancy tricks. He hadn't just beaten him. He had made his effort look crude and simplistic. Aizawa lowered the tablet, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It was the scariest thing the class had seen all day. Logical ruse, he said, and the entire class let out a collective sigh of relief. The expulsion threat was just a rational deception to get you to push your limits. He paused, his smile widening. Except for Mineta. You're in last place. You're expelled. The small purple-haired boy let out a shriek of utter despair. Aizawa let him panic for a full 5 seconds before sighing. I was lying about that part, too. Welcome to UA. He turned and began to walk away. Your real training begins tomorrow. As the students began to chatter, recovering from the emotional whiplash, Izuku felt a presence behind him. Midoriya. It was Aizawa. He had circled back. A word. The other students gave them a wide berth. Your methods are illogical, chaotic, and a logistical nightmare for my curriculum, Aizawa said, his tone flat. You broke my grip machine, you nearly gave the entire class tinnitus, and you tore up my field for spare parts. The groundskeeper is going to have my head. Izuku braced himself for a lecture. However, Aizawa continued, his tired eyes fixing on Izuku with a new, sharp intensity. You finished in the top 3 of every single event. You think on your feet, you assess your resources instantly, and you're ruthlessly efficient. You don't have the mindset of a typical hero student. You have the mindset of an underground operative, a problem solver. He gestured to the dismantled launcher. This kind of thinking, it's dangerous. It's unpredictable. But in the right situation, it's more valuable than 100 raw power quirks. He let out a weary sigh. You're going to be a massive headache, Midoriya. But you have potential. Don't waste it by blowing your own arms off. He turned and left without another word, leaving Izuku standing alone by his magnificent, temporary creation. Later that day, as classes ended, Izuku was packing his bag when he saw a flash of pink and a mess of blonde hair held back by a pair of chunky goggles zoom past the classroom door. It was a girl from the support course, he vaguely recognized. She skidded to a halt, and then zipped back, poking her head into the room. Her eyes, magnified by a set of crosshair-like lenses, scanned the class before locking onto Izuku. "You!" she exclaimed, pointing a grease-stained finger at him. She marched into the room, her movements a bundle of unrestrained energy. "You're the one! From the exam, the one who built that beautiful, unsafe, gloriously overpowered kinetic cannon. I saw the specs on the damage report. The stress fractures on the surrounding buildings were a work of art." Izuku stared at her. The structural damage was an unfortunate but acceptable consequence of achieving primary mission objective. The girl's eyes lit up, sparkling with manic glee. Acceptable consequence. Yes. I love it. She got right in his face, her own expression a mirror of his own when he was deep in a build. Your build-on-the-fly technique is insane. The energy transfer, the material selection. What's your cycle time? 10 seconds? 8? And what you did today with that lawnmower engine, a centrifugal launch with a vibrational power assist? That's beautifully inefficient. A glorious waste of energy for maximum effect. It's poetry. They stared at each other for a second, a silent, rapid-fire exchange of mutual understanding passing between them. While the rest of the world saw Izuku's creations as junk, she saw the genius in the chaos. While others saw her gadgets as weird and dangerous, he saw the brilliant, if unstable, engineering. "Hatsune," she said, sticking out a hand. "Support course. My babies and I are going to change the world." "Midoriya Izuku," he replied, shaking her hand. It was a firm, callous grip, just like his own. "Hero course. I just make do with what's available." "Make do?" she scoffed. "Don't be modest. You're a fellow artist of assembly. A connoisseur of chaos. We have to compare schematics sometime." And for the first time that day, Izuku felt a genuine, unforced smile spread across his face. He had spent his entire life being the only one who spoke his language. He just found a native speaker.